Do you ever get that strange, almost disorienting feeling, like you're navigating your own life, wearing an invisible costume? Not a literal one, obviously, but a carefully constructed psychological one. A persona meticulously assembled to meet the myriad expectations of the world around you, the demands of your family, your workplace, your social circles, even the subtle pressures emanating from the culture at large. You find yourself playing the expected roles, reciting the acceptable lines, pursuing the goals that society has deemed worthy and successful. Maybe you diligently climb the corporate ladder, curate the perfect, enviable online presence, dutifully fulfill the obligations of being a good son or daughter, a supportive partner, a responsible parent. Outwardly, you might even achieve considerable success by conventional standards, garnering approval, admiration, perhaps even envy. Yet beneath this polished surface, doesn't there sometimes linger a nagging dissonance, a quiet whisper of discontent, an unsettling feeling of disconnection, a persistent sense that the you performing so capably on life's stage isn't the real you, or at least not the complete you? You feel the immense, often unspoken, yet powerfully pervasive pressure to fit in, to conform, to follow the well-trodden, predictable path laid out by others. But what happens to your unique, individual spark, your authentic self, in that relentless process of adaptation and conformity? Does it get buried under layers of obligation? Does it slowly atrophy from lack of oxygen, from lack of genuine expression? Does a vital, irreplaceable part of you begin to dim, overshadowed by the constant weight of external expectation? This profound tension, this precarious tightrope walk between expressing our genuine inner core and conforming to external pressures, isn't just a minor psychological inconvenience. It's arguably one of the central, most persistent, and deeply felt struggles inherent in the human condition itself. It echoes through almost every significant domain of our lives: our career choices and ambitions, the nature and quality of our intimate relationships, our political beliefs and affiliations, our consumer habits, even the private landscape of our thoughts, feelings, and secret desires. Today, we're going to dissect this ubiquitous struggle, not by offering easy answers or comforting platitudes, but by examining it through the sharp, demanding, sometimes unsettling, yet ultimately profoundly liberating philosophical lens of one of the 20th century's most influential, controversial, and widely read thinkers, the French existentialist philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre. We'll unpack his radical, often challenging ideas about absolute freedom, inescapable responsibility, the seductive and insidious trap of self-deception he called bad faith, and why, in his uncompromising view, choosing authenticity, however difficult, anxiety-provoking, and socially isolating it might be, is the only path to living a truly meaningful, genuinely human life, rather than merely existing as a passive object, a predictable cog in a vast, impersonal machine. Jean-Paul Sartre wasn't merely an abstract philosopher confined to dusty university libraries. He was a dynamic, multifaceted intellectual force who exploded onto the European scene in the mid-20th century, particularly within the vibrant, questioning atmosphere of post-World War II Paris. This was a unique historical moment, deeply marked by the collapse of old political and moral certainties, widespread disillusionment following unprecedented violence and destruction, and an urgent, existential need to grapple anew with the very meaning of human existence, freedom, and value in a world that often seemed absurd, indifferent, or even hostile. Sartre, alongside other key figures like Simone de Beauvoir, Albert Camus, and Maurice Merleau-Ponty, became a central voice articulating the core concerns of existentialism. This diverse philosophical movement, resisting easy definition, fundamentally places the concrete, lived experience of the individual human being, with its inherent freedom, inescapable choices, pervasive anxieties, and relentless search for meaning and purpose, at the very heart of philosophical inquiry. Sartre's influence extended far beyond academia. His ideas permeated the cultural landscape through his widely read novels like Nausea and the Roads to Freedom trilogy. His influential and often provocative plays, such as No Exit and The Flies, his tireless political activism, and countless philosophical essays and public lectures, making existentialism not just a philosophy, but a defining cultural mood of the era. At the absolute bedrock of Sartre's entire existentialist framework lies a concise, almost aphoristic, yet world-altering philosophical declaration: existence precedes essence. This might initially sound like dense philosophical jargon, but its implications are radical, far-reaching, and deeply personal for how we understand ourselves and our place in the world. Let's carefully unpack it. For the most of the preceding history of Western philosophy, heavily influenced by thinkers like Plato and Aristotle, as well as by dominant religious doctrines, the prevailing assumption was generally the exact opposite: essence precedes existence. This traditional view holds that things in the world, including human beings, possess a predefined nature, a core blueprint, an inherent purpose, or an essential set of characteristics before they actually come into physical being. Think again of a craftsman designing and making a tool, like a letter opener. The idea of the letter opener, its specific function, its design, its essence, exists clearly in the craftsman's mind before the physical object is manufactured, before it actually exists. Similarly, many religious traditions posited that God created humanity with a specific, divinely ordained nature, purpose, and set of moral guidelines. Our essence was thought to be given to us. Sartre performed a radical inversion of this long-standing assumption, specifically concerning human beings. For manufactured objects, he conceded, essence might indeed precede existence. But for us, for human consciousness, he argued passionately and consistently, the situation is fundamentally reversed. We are simply born. We find ourselves existing, thrown, as the existentialists often put it, using Heidegger's term Geworfenheit, into this world, into a specific time, place, and situation, without any predetermined human nature, without a divine plan dictating our destiny, without an inherent, fixed essence or a pre-written life script telling us who we are supposed to be. We arrive first, simply as conscious, existing beings, aware of ourselves and the world. Our essence, who we fundamentally are, our character, our values, our identity, is not given to us at birth like a factory default setting. Instead, Sartre insisted, it is something we must actively, continuously create for ourselves, moment by moment, day by day, through the myriad choices we make, the actions we undertake or fail to undertake, the values we commit to through our behavior, and the life projects we pursue throughout the entire course of our lives. We first exist. Then we define ourselves through the process of living. There is no fixed, universal human nature to rely on or to blame. This radical idea leads directly and inexorably to Sartre's equally radical concept of absolute, inescapable freedom. If there is no preordained essence determining our path, no divine command structuring our lives, no biological or psychological determinism that ultimately dictates our choices and character, then we are, in his stark, unforgettable, and often misinterpreted formulation, condemned to be free. Why use such a negative-sounding word, condemned? Because for Sartre, this freedom isn't a light, easy, comfortable gift to be celebrated without reservation. It is, rather, a profound, terrifying, and inescapable burden. We are absolutely free to choose what we become. We are free to interpret our situation, to give meaning to events, to choose our attitude, to decide how we respond, to select the values that guide our actions. Consequently, we cannot ultimately appeal to our genetics, saying, "I was born this way," our upbringing, "My parents messed me up," our social conditioning, "Society expects this of me," our psychological complexes, "My anxiety made me do it," or even God's will, "It was God's plan," as a definitive, final excuse for our actions, our character, or the state of our lives. We are entirely, terrifyingly responsible for what we make of ourselves and the meaning we inject into an otherwise meaningless world. Every single choice, from the monumental life decisions down to the seemingly trivial everyday actions, even the choice to remain passive or indecisive, is a brushstroke contributing to the ongoing, never-finished portrait of who we are choosing to become. There is simply no escaping this freedom. It is the fundamental condition of human consciousness. Now, truly confronting this dizzying abyss of total freedom and total responsibility is, according to Sartre, inherently and unavoidably anxiety-inducing. He used the specific term anguish or angst, drawing on the work of earlier existential thinkers like Soren Kierkegaard, to describe this unique existential feeling. It's crucial to distinguish this from everyday worry or fear, which are usually directed towards specific objects or potential outcomes. Existential anguish for Sartre is the profound dizziness, the vertigo, the sense of nausea we experience when we genuinely grasp the sheer, unsupported weight of our freedom. It's the chilling realization that we are the sole, unsupported authors of our lives, the creators of our own values, adrift in a vast, indifferent universe without objective guidelines, external guarantees, divine safety nets, or ultimate excuses. Furthermore, Sartre added another layer to this burden by arguing that when we choose an action or a value for ourselves, we are not just choosing for our individual selves. We are implicitly choosing for all humanity. In deciding how I should live, what I deem valuable, I am simultaneously projecting an image, a model, of what I believe a human being ought to be. This profound, almost unbearable sense of responsibility, not just for one's own existence, but in a way, for the very image and value of humanity itself. This deep anguish of freedom is profoundly uncomfortable. It's heavy. It can feel crushing. And it is precisely this deep existential discomfort, this pervasive anguish, that makes the allure of conformity, the powerful desire to escape into predefined roles, established norms, and ready-made identities, so incredibly potent and perpetually tempting. This leads us directly to one of Sartre's most crucial, insightful, psychologically astute, and perhaps personally convicting concepts: mauvaise foi, which is typically translated from French as bad faith. Bad faith is essentially a pervasive, insidious form of psychological self-deception. It encompasses the myriad ways, both subtle and overt, that we lie to ourselves, consciously or unconsciously, in a desperate attempt to flee from the terrifying burden of our radical freedom and the crushing weight of our inescapable responsibility. When we act in bad faith, we pretend to ourselves and others that we are not free. We act as if we are determined entirely by external factors, treating ourselves like objects passively shaped by forces beyond our control, rather than acknowledging our status as free, conscious subjects who actively choose their responses and create their meaning. We strategically reduce ourselves to our social roles, our job titles, Our past experiences, our personality traits, or abstract labels as a way to avoid the anxiety inherent in choosing who we are right now and who we will become in the next moment. Sartre provided several vivid literary and philosophical examples to illustrate bad faith in action. His most famous is perhaps the description of the waiter in a Parisian café, which we touched on earlier. The waiter performs his duties with an exaggerated, almost theatrical precision. His movements are a little too sharp, his voice a little too solicitous, his posture a little too eager, his attention a little too focused on the mechanics of his role. Sartre suggests this waiter isn't simply being a waiter in a natural way. He is actively playing at being a waiter. He is treating himself as if his entire essence, his whole being, is completely defined and exhausted by the social category waiter. He is hiding from his fundamental human freedom to be otherwise, perhaps to be clumsy, indifferent, rude, genuinely engaged, or even to walk away from the job entirely. He strategically reduces himself to his social function as a complex mechanism to escape the anguish of confronting his broader human freedom and the daunting responsibility of choosing who he is beyond that specific, predefined role. But bad faith manifests in countless other, perhaps more familiar, ways in our daily lives. Think of the person who constantly blames their circumstances or their past for their present unhappiness or inaction, saying things like, "I had no choice in the matter," or "Given my difficult childhood, what else could I do?" While Sartre fully acknowledged the reality and influence of our facticity, our given situation, including our past, body, and environment, bad faith arises when we use this facticity as an absolute determinant, denying our transcendence, our fundamental freedom to choose our response, our attitude, or our meaning-making in relation to those circumstances. Consider the individual who rigidly adheres to a political ideology, a religious dogma, or a set of cultural norms without ever engaging in critical questioning or taking personal responsibility for holding those beliefs. Simply accepting the ready-made answers provided by the group. Or think of the person who defines their entire identity and self-worth solely by their professional success, their relationship status, saying, "I'm nothing without my partner," their material possessions, or a diagnostic label, "I can't change, I have clinical depression." Treating these external or descriptive labels as fixed, immutable essences rather than aspects of a complex, freely choosing self. All these represent common strategies, whether conscious or deeply unconscious, to flee from the vertigo of freedom into the apparent solidity and security of a predetermined identity or external excuse. Conformity, therefore, in its myriad social, cultural, and psychological manifestations, often functions as a primary strategy and expression of bad faith. When we blindly follow prevailing societal norms without critical reflection, when we adopt opinions or lifestyles simply because they are popular, fashionable, or expected by our peer group, when we pursue life goals like career advancement, marriage, or accumulating wealth solely because they represent the socially sanctioned definition of success, or when we rigidly adhere to a predefined social role like the dutiful employee, the perfect mother, the strong, silent man, actively suppressing any parts of ourselves, any feelings or desires that don't neatly fit that prescribed mold, we are very often operating squarely within the realm of bad faith. We are passively allowing society, our immediate social circle, our family history, or our perceived role within these structures to dictate and define our essence for us. We are abdicating the difficult anxiety-provoking, yet uniquely human task of creating our essence ourselves through conscious, deliberate choice and unwavering commitment. We opt for the comfort, predictability, and external validation offered by the pre-written script over the terrifying, uncertain, yet potentially exhilarating freedom of existential improvisation. We effectively let the external world tell us who we are, instead of claiming the inherent authority and responsibility to decide for ourselves. So given this stark diagnosis of our human condition and the pervasive temptation of bad faith, what is the alternative path according to Sartre? What does it actually mean to live authentically? Authenticity, within the specific framework of Sartrean existentialism, is crucially not about discovering some hidden, fixed, pre-existing true self buried deep inside you, like finding a lost treasure. Remember Sartre's foundational principle: existence precedes essence. There is no essential, authentic self given to us beforehand, waiting to be unearthed. Rather, authenticity for Sartre involves the courageous, ongoing, moment-to-moment confrontation with and embrace of our radical, inescapable freedom. It means acknowledging the inherent, unavoidable anguish that accompanies this freedom without immediately fleeing into the comforting illusions and self-deceptions of bad faith. It means consciously choosing our path, our values, our commitments, our life projects, and then taking full, unreserved responsibility for those choices and their consequences, both for our own developing identity and as a statement about the kind of humanity we wish to embody. An authentic life, therefore, is a life lived in lucid, unflinching awareness of our freedom and our responsibility. It involves making choices that genuinely stem from our own freely chosen projects, values, and commitments. Even and perhaps especially when those choices are difficult, unpopular, unconventional, socially inconvenient, or run directly counter to prevailing societal expectations or pressures. It means actively refusing to allow ourselves to be wholly defined, limited, or confined by external labels, imposed social roles, past experiences, however traumatic, or the judgments and expectations of others. Authenticity requires constant vigilance, a perpetual self-awareness regarding the subtle and insidious ways bad faith can creep into our thinking and behavior, and a continuous, renewed effort to own our choices and their consequences, without resorting to excuses or blaming external factors. Authenticity, in this view, isn't a final destination, a static state of perfection one achieves and then rests in. It is, rather, the ongoing, often arduous, sometimes exhilarating, lifelong process of choosing and creating oneself in freedom and responsibility, moment by moment, choice by choice. In concrete terms, living authentically might mean choosing a career path less traveled, but deeply aligned with personal passion, even if it brings less status or security. It might mean speaking out against an injustice you witness in your workplace or community, even when doing so carries significant personal or professional risk. It might mean consciously designing the terms of your intimate relationships based on genuine connection, mutual respect, and shared values, rather than passively conforming to traditional societal scripts or expectations. It might mean acknowledging uncomfortable truths about your own motivations, flaws, or complicity in harmful systems, rather than seeking refuge in comforting self-justifications or convenient illusions. Of course, Sartre was a realist, not an idealist in this regard. He fully acknowledged the immense practical difficulty of striving for authenticity in the real world. society does exert enormous, relentless, and often subtle pressures to conform. From pervasive advertising and consumer culture that dictate our desires, to educational systems that often prioritize compliance over critical thinking, to family expectations and peer group dynamics that enforce unspoken norms. We are constantly bombarded with powerful messages about who we should be, what constitutes success, what desires are acceptable, and how we should live our lives. Sartre also wrote powerfully and insightfully about the objectifying power of the other. The simple awareness of being perceived, judged, or categorized by another person, he argued, can have the effect of turning us from a free subject into a fixed object in their eyes. It can induce feelings of shame, self-consciousness, and a powerful urge to conform to their expectations, making it incredibly challenging to maintain our subjective sense of freedom, agency, and self-creation. Living authentically, therefore, almost inevitably means swimming against a strong cultural and social tide. It frequently involves facing potential disapproval, misunderstanding, criticism, judgment, loneliness, or even outright ostracization from those who are threatened by or cannot comprehend such freedom. It demands significant courage, psychological resilience, self-trust, and a strong inner compass to navigate these external pressures without succumbing entirely to bad faith. It's also vital to clarify, again, that authenticity for Sartre does not equate to mere eccentricity for its own sake, impulsive or random rebellion against all conventions, or a blanket rejection of all social norms simply to be different. That kind of reactive behavior could easily be just another form of inauthenticity, another predefined role being played, the role of the rebel or the nonconformist. The crucial distinction lies not in the outward behavior itself, but in the quality and consciousness of the choice behind it. An authentically living individual might consciously choose to adhere to certain social conventions, fulfill specific social roles, or participate in established institutions, perhaps for practical reasons, out of a sense of chosen commitment, or as part of a larger life project. The fundamental difference lies in whether this adherence stems from a free, conscious, deliberately chosen, and responsibly owned decision, or whether it arises from unthinking habit, deep-seated fear of judgment, passive acquiescence, or the pervasive self-deception of bad faith. The authentic person owns their choice, including choices to conform in specific contexts, taking full responsibility for it, while the person operating in bad faith simply is their conformity, effectively denying their underlying freedom to choose otherwise. So where does this demanding, perhaps even intimidating, Sartrean perspective leave us as ordinary individuals attempting to navigate the complexities of our own lives in a world seemingly saturated with pressures to conform and temptations towards self-deception? Sartre's philosophy offers no easy answers, no simple 10-step programs, no comforting reassurances that everything will be okay if we just follow the rules. Instead, it presents us with a stark, uncompromising challenge and, paradoxically, alongside it, a profound and potentially liberating sense of empowerment. He relentlessly, almost ruthlessly, reminds us that despite all the powerful external pressures, despite the weight of our personal histories, despite the seductive allure of easy answers, despite the inherent anxieties of existence, we are fundamentally, radically, inescapably free. We are the artists, the sculptors, the sole authors of our own lives. Whether we choose to acknowledge this awesome responsibility or flee from it, Conformity, and the pervasive bad faith that so often underpins it, offers a tempting, readily available escape route from the heavy burden of this freedom. It provides the comforting illusion of security, belonging, certainty, and preordained meaning by allowing external forces, society, tradition, authority figures, peer groups, predefined roles, to dictate who we are and how we should live. But this escape, Sartre insists with unwavering conviction, comes at an immense, irreplaceable cost. The cost of our authenticity, our vitality, our potential for genuine meaning, perhaps even the very core of our unique humanity. Choosing authenticity, in the demanding yet ultimately rewarding Sartrean sense, means courageously embracing the difficult, often unsettling, yet uniquely human freedom of continuous self-creation. It means consciously choosing our values and taking full responsibility for forging meaning and purpose in a universe that offers none intrinsically. It means living with the acute, sometimes painful awareness that every choice we make, every action we take or avoid, matters profoundly because it actively shapes the person we are becoming and the kind of world we are contributing to. It is undoubtedly a demanding, challenging path, one fraught with inherent anguish, inescapable uncertainty, and the constant possibility of failure or falling back into bad faith. But for Sartre, and for the existentialist tradition he championed, it is the only path that allows us to live fully, vibrantly, meaningfully, and truly as conscious, free human subjects, rather than merely existing as passive, determined objects shaped and defined entirely by forces beyond our control. The pressure to conform, in myriad forms, will likely always be a persistent feature of human social existence. The subtle, comforting, yet ultimately soul-crushing temptation of bad faith will always linger at the edges of our awareness, offering an easy way out of the burden of freedom. But Sartre's enduring philosophical legacy is the relentless, deeply personal question he poses to each and every one of us, moment by moment. Will you passively allow the world, your past conditioning, or the expectations of others to define the essence of who you are? Or will you dare to claim your radical freedom, courageously face the inherent anguish, and actively, responsibly, authentically create yourself? The choice, ultimately, inescapably, profoundly, is yours alone. And you are responsible for it. Thank you for joining this extensive exploration into Sartre's challenging yet vital ideas on authenticity and conformity. I sincerely hope it has provided some valuable perspective, perhaps sparked some critical reflection on your own life, your choices, and the complex pressures you navigate daily. If these ideas resonated with you, or even if they provoked disagreement, please consider liking the video and subscribing for more deep dives into philosophical explorations of the human condition. What specific pressures to conform do you feel most strongly in your own life right now? And how do you try to navigate them while staying true to yourself? Share your thoughts, experiences, and challenges in the comments below. Until next time, strive to live freely, choose consciously, and embrace the profound, demanding, yet ultimately rewarding responsibility of being human.